Hello, America. Welcome back to Honest Tax Returns. This is the show and tell version, and that's where I'm going to show you how I did my 2016 taxes. This is presented to the American people on 28 March 2017. First of all, I was given a 1099 miscellaneous and a 1099-Q. So I'm going to show you how I corrected my 1099 miscellaneous and how I paid my lawful tax that was due on my 1099-Q. For those of you who are wage earners and received a W-2, please see Honest Tax Returns Part 1 of 6. Now let me show you how to correct a 1099 miscellaneous. Here's your 1099 miscellaneous, and the first thing you'll notice is that the most important word on this 1099 is the word if. It says here, if you're required to file a return and if this income is taxable. Okay, so those are big ifs. Let's suppose you are not required to file a return, or if you are not, or if this income is not taxable. Then what do? Well, that's where the second most important word comes into place, and it's also the word if, but it's right here. It's associated with this corrected box, which, if checked, makes your statement corrected. Now, the important thing to understand is that if you do not correct your 1099, then it's presumed to be true. And if it's presumed to be true, then you have just voluntarily complied with all the provisions of those two ifs. That is to say, you are required to file and this income is taxable. So that's a big if. Now let's see how I did my 1099 miscellaneous. But before we do that, let's examine the law that authorizes a 1099 in the first place. The authority for the 1099 is at 6041A, and it has three requirements. The first is that the man or the person cutting out the 1099 is a service recipient, and the second is that service recipient must be engaged in a trade or business, and the third is that the transaction must be worth $600 or more. Now, what is a service recipient? Well, according to this code, a service recipient is a person, or to be treated as a person, and it includes any government unit and any agency or instrumentality thereof. Okay? A trade or business includes the functions of a public office. So in other words, you have to be a government unit and you have to do a trade or business which includes the functions of a public office. Now you might say, well, it includes these two things, but maybe it does not exclude others. Well, the reality is the word includes in law actually excludes everything that's not included. For a complete proof on that, see Honest Tax Returns Part 3 of 6 for the complete meaning of the word includes. So this is my corrected 1099, and the first thing I did was I put an X where it says corrected. The next thing I did was under non-employee compensation, where the where there was a non-zero number, I replaced that with a 0. And the reason I can and I did replace that was because of the statements that I've written below. One, that no payment was received from a service recipient. In other words, I didn't get paid from any government unit, any agency, or instrumentality thereof. And two, no payment was in the meaning of the term net earnings from self-employment, which is that gross income derived by an individual from any trade or business. That is, I did not perform the functions of a public office. Okay, and that allows me to put a 0 where that compensation is. Now, what I've done here is, one, I refuted the presumption that I received a benefit from the federal government. And 2, I refuted the presumption that I exercised a federal privilege in performing the functions of a public office. Now, if I didn't receive a benefit and I didn't exercise a privilege, then I did not derive any gross income. That is, I did not get any federal income. So if I did not receive any gross income or federal income, then Section 63 taxable income is also 0. Now, in order to understand the concept of gross income, I would refer you to the video on honest tax returns, part 5 of 6, where I discussed the the anatomy of gross income. Okay. So I corrected the 1099 miscellaneous, and I put a 0 there, and I paid 0 federal income tax on my 1099 miscellaneous. Now let's see where I actually paid my tax for 2016. So this is another 1099 I received. This is a 1099Q. In this case, it is the money that is paid or dispersed from a qualified education savings account. Now, I saved up money for my children when I did work for the government, and I decided that I was going to withdraw all that money, primarily because the education savings account is also constructively fraudulent. But this is not a video for that. But anyway, these ifs are so. That is to say, this money is taxable income. It is I am required to file it, and it is taxable income. Therefore, I did not put a checkbox on the corrected sign. Okay, instead I wrote a note to the IRS, and I wrote entry on line 21 of Form 1040 in the amount of $20,000 is payment from a qualified education savings account. Tax deferred contributions to this account were made with remuneration for services performed for the United States during my employment as an officer of the Army circa 1999 through 2014. To the best of my understanding, these funds are now subject to an income tax under the excise laws of the United States. I certify under penalty of perjury under the laws of the United States of America that the foregoing is true and correct. And I executed on March 1st, 2017. Now I'm going to explain every line in this note to the IRS, beginning with remuneration for services performed. Also, I'm going to explain the United States as highlighted in purple, in orange, and in blue, because there are 3 United States that you need to understand that exist. And finally, I'm going to talk about how my income was subject to an excise law of the United States. All right, let us begin with the remuneration for services performed. Remember, I don't write like this. I take things from the code as they are written for me. So let's go to Title 263401, in which it defined the term wages. Now, wages mean all remuneration for services by an employee for his employer. Now, the word employee, you should also understand, is not some ordinary employee. An employee, as defined in the tax code, means an officer, an employee, or an elected official of the United States. Also, an employee of a federal corporation. Now, this was discussed in Honest Tax Returns Part 4 of 6, where we discussed the constitutional meaning of income and also the 16th Amendment, both its intent and its effect. The federal employee, or rather the employee who is an officer of a federal corporation, is deriving a federal privilege, that of operating in limited liability, and therefore they are subject to the federal income tax. Okay, those are the only sort of private type of people that are taxed. Also, Remember the word employer here. The word employer here means the person for whom an individual performed any service. The word service is an important word because who receives the service? Who do you perform a service to? Besides an employer, which is defined to be the United States. The word service means it's service rendered towards a service recipient. So what is a service recipient? We just learned that it includes any government unit and any agency or instrumentality thereof. That is to say, the word service means working for the government. So if you work for Walmart, you did not perform a service, okay? You worked for Walmart, and that's really it. But if you worked in the military, then you performed military service, or you performed civil service, or postal service, or if you work for the IRS, guess what? You work for the Internal Revenue Service, or if you work for the Forest Service. All those denote government services. So the word service is important to understand. Next, let's study the United States, as highlighted in purple, orange, and blue. Now, why are there three colors to indicate what the United States is? Well, that's because according to the Supreme Court, there are three United Stateses. So, Hoven and Allison Company v. VAT, 1945. The court determined that the term United States means the name of a sovereign, occupying the position and analogous to that of other sovereigns in the family of nations. For instance, the United States, Russia, China, Germany, France, those are sovereign countries. So that's one way to use the term United States. The other term for the United States is the territory over which the sovereign or the sovereignty of the United States extends. So what is the territory over which the United States sovereignty extends, where the United States is the sovereign? Well, look in your Constitution. It's at Article 1, Section 8, Clause 17. It's an area not exceeding 10 miles square, and all its territories and also places ceded to it by the states. Okay? Now, the last meaning of the term United States is the one that we often think of when we think of the United States, which are the 50 states united by and under the Constitution. It's very important you understand that there are three United States and how you use them properly in the legal context. Okay? So which United States does the IRC, the Internal Revenue Code, refer to? Well, let's take a look at Title 26, Internal Revenue Code 7701A9. The term United States includes the states and the District of Columbia. And also, the next line over, the word state includes the District of Columbia. So maybe we can put two and two together and we get the United States includes only the states in the District of Columbia, and the term state includes the District of Columbia, which means, in my simple mind, that the United States equals the District of Columbia and excludes the 50 states of the Union. Of course, that is absolutely true. See Honest Tax Returns Part 3 of 6, where we describe what the word internal, as in the word internal revenue, really means. Okay, so in the tax code, the United States equals the District of Columbia and excludes the 50 states of the Union. So now that we understand that, we can read this note to the IRS and understand that I performed services for the United States, the sovereign, and now that income is due under the excise laws of the United States, as in the territory of the United States, and that would be analogous to if you did work and received state income, let's say from Missouri, then that income is subject to the excise laws of the state of Missouri, and clearly that is a geographic concept. And thirdly, the United States of America, as written under the certification clause, under Title 28, Section 1746, this United States means the United States of America. That's the 50 United States united by and under the Constitution. And lastly, where I've signed without the United States, I'm lifting words directly out of the code, meaning I am outside of the territorial limits of the United States. Again, that's the District of Columbia. Okay, last sentence fragment that I would like to bring to your attention is subject to an income tax under the excise laws of the United States. So what am I telling the audience is I'm telling you that the federal income tax is an excise tax, is an indirect excise tax that comes is within the laws of the United States. And where do I get that line from? Well, I look at the original 1862 tax return and I see exactly that line. It says subject to an income tax under the excise laws of the United States. Again, I don't write my own words in my tax return. I use what is given to me. In this case, I also found this exact line at the IRS's own website, so they must endorse this statement. Now, the last time I checked, this website contains this statement, subject to an income tax under the excise laws of the United States. Additionally, I'd like to refer you to the House Congressional Record from March 27th, 1943, in which the Congress stated that before the 16th Amendment, it was an excise tax, and that indeed it was the fundamental nature of that tax. And then after the 16th Amendment, the income tax is, notice the word is as opposed to was, is an excise tax. And the word is refers to 1943. So before and after the 16th Amendment, the federal income tax is an excise tax. Okay, so there you go. Now we can see what the meaning of my jurat is, and where I basically plagiarized the codes and the other official sources in order to write my note to the IRS. So anyway, here's how I filled out my 1040 form. I have the standard deductions. I have no wages, no salary, no tips, and that's why it says 0 here. For the 1099-Q payment from the Educational Savings Plan, there's $20,000, and again, this is for demonstration purposes only. So then I just go through the list, take my standard deductions, look at the tax code, and I end up paying them $156. I sign my name here, comma, without the United States, and that is it. So to know more about the federal income tax, please watch the 6-part video series that I created called the Honest Tax Returns, part 1 through 6. And know the truth, and the truth shall set you free. Thank you. Please share, like, and comment. Remember, you have a duty to be honest, to obey the law as it's written, and not according to the myth that the IRS likes to perpetuate. And also, you have a duty to keep your brother from harm and injustice. So share this with another American. End of presentation. Thank you very much.